Very welcome back to the Public Eye Business Podcast brought to you by Granite Exchange. I'm your host, Sarah Travers, and throughout the series I'll be speaking with local entrepreneurs and business owners to learn more about how their companies have come to be, to gain insight into their growth, and crucially, find out how they continue to innovate. So wherever you get your podcasts from, remember to keep an eye out for all new episodes and subscribe to stay up to date. Well, today I'm joined in the studio by Angharad Maxwell, founder of Hilltop Flowers. Angharad, how are you today? Welcome.
I'm great, Sarah. Thank you. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm really looking forward to this episode.
Thanks.
I don't think we've ever had a business like this in the studio today. But before we begin and get into our conversation, I'm going to give a little bit of background on Angharad and Hilltop Flowers. Angharad was previously a physiotherapist but left the NHS to pursue her dream of becoming a sustainable flower farmer with a little help from her husband David. Now, her husband is David Maxwell. Many of you will know as presenter of BBC Radio Ulster's Gardener's Corner. Set in a beautiful location in the hills above Belfast and overlooking Strangford Lough, Hilltop Flowers prides itself on producing premium quality seasonal flowers which are grown organically. These luxury blooms are sold both directly to customers and to florists. Angharad provides flowers that cannot be sourced elsewhere and are all chemical free. Angharad, it just sounds like the most idyllic, wonderful life that you lead. But I'm sure it's hard work.
Absolutely. Doesn't it sound gorgeous? And, to be honest, that's what I want people to think. But the reality is, as much as I love it, it is really hard. Both physical graft and mental graft, actually, logistics and a lot of spreadsheets, seed sowing spreadsheets and planting plans, and there's a lot of head work goes on as well as physical work.
So did you always want to own your own business because you were a physiotherapist? So how did it happen?
Absolutely not, Sarah. I had never even considered having my own business. I was born to a dairy farming family in Wales, very rural Wales. Absolutely loved being outside as a child. I was always attached to my auntie's hip, walking around the farm and helping out. And while I loved the animals and I loved the outside, loved the crops, I also loved all things medical and people. And so life initially led me down a very different path. I went to university in England and became a physiotherapist and worked as a physio for almost 20 years, which I can say I absolutely loved and hadn't even thought about becoming a businesswoman. But then things changed.
Yeah, and that's what often happens. Life gets in the way or presents you with opportunities. Tell me a little bit about David. Obviously, I actually worked with your husband, David, in BBC
yes.
Northern Ireland. We were both journalists in the newsroom, but David always had a hankering for working and doing exactly the job that he's doing now in Gardener's Corner. So your love of each other also blossomed, but also this love of flowers.
Absolutely, Sarah. I mean, we have always had the most fabulous garden, not because of me. If I did any gardening, it was mostly the clearing up, which I didn't mind doing at all, or I was more interested actually in growing something that was useful, like vegetables or fruit. But actually, it was just over 10 years ago when a very dear friend came round for dinner and she brought me a bottle of wine in one hand and a bunch of flowers in the other hand, and they were the most beautiful flowers I have ever seen in my life. They lasted a really long time in the vase and they had the most fabulous scent, which I'm sure your listeners will know. If you go and buy flowers these days, they may be beautiful, but you don't get a scent out of them.
That's so true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just so delighted with them. But the biggest realization of everything was that I had all of those flowers and more in my own garden, mostly thanks to David. So I started picking flowers, bringing them in. And this sounds ridiculous now, but my sort of mentality was flowers in the garden, stay in the garden. But if you want flowers from the house, you go to the supermarket or the florist, which seems ridiculous now.
But you didn't want to cut the
I
beautiful
didn't want
blooms
to
in the
cut
garden.
them, and they were so gorgeous. But so my journey started. But it was for myself, and it was for lovely jugs of flowers in the kitchen or on the hall table, and giving them as gifts to people. But very quickly you start thinking, oh, I don't have enough flowers to do everything that I want here, or enough gifts that I want to give. So David and I planted more and more flowers that we could cut, but also were gorgeous in the garden. And I think that what I just absolutely love is that everything that you can grow in the garden, most things you can bring inside. You don't need to have a specific cut flower area. You need to be able to enjoy the garden, but bring them inside. And over the years, a couple of people sort of suggested, oh, why don't you make this into a business? These flowers are absolutely gorgeous. And I loved my job as a physiotherapist. It wasn't something that I'd ever contemplated. I thought, well, if I was ever made redundant, or if life took me in another direction, or if we moved jobs, if David moved jobs and I couldn't find a job as a physiotherapist, maybe that's what I would do. But almost 2 years ago now, circumstances in life kind of turned a different direction, where I realised the hours that I was doing weren't going to work with the family. I was pregnant again, and my brother was very unwell, and so I stood back from physiotherapy. And after I made the decision to stand back, I thought, oh, is this the right time to start thinking about growing flowers as a business?
And what happened next?
Well, Sarah, I had been doing a lot of work in the background. This didn't just start 2 years ago. For my own planting knowledge and for my own flower farming or flower growing knowledge and cut flower knowledge, I had been doing courses in the background. I had been reading books. I had been following people on social media. I'd also visited a few flower farms in England and Wales. So while, yes, the business started a year ago officially, in my mind, it had been going for a lot longer. But the problem I had was finding land. People either wanted to sell you 20 acres, which I neither could afford and didn't want, or people wanted to rent you something the space of this small room for thousands of pounds, a tiny wee allotment. Mm-hmm. So the real breakthrough came when a friend was sitting in my garden and said, Angharad, when are you going to make this into a business? And I said, Dave, I would love to. I just don't have land. And he said, I know someone who has just inherited a field and a polytunnel, and he's not using it. Would you like me to talk to him?
Oh, my goodness.
And so by the end of the week, I had rented 1/2 an acre in a 4-acre field with the use of 1/2 an industrial polytunnel and running water.
And how did you feel at that moment?
Then I knew it was all or nothing, Sarah. Then I knew that was it. I had to put every last piece of me into this to make it work, you know.
And at this stage, were you thinking, I might go back to the physiotherapy, I could keep doing that? Or had you definitely just decided that chapter's closed?
That chapter had closed. I knew how hard farming is generally, having been brought up on a farm. I know that it is your whole life. Yeah. And flower farming in many ways isn't different, and when it's your own business. And so I knew that the chapter had closed on physiotherapy, and I was really excited for what was to come, but also in order not to get completely overwhelmed. I mean, what do you do when you're standing there with a very rough 1/2 acre that was very, very sort of lumpy and bumpy? You need to make it prime ground to grow flowers. You just have to step back and take it one small step at a time. And I was very fortunate that actually I started renting the ground in sort of the middle of summer. So I knew that I wasn't going to be selling flowers till the next March. So I knew that I had quite a lot of time to put preparation in place before I needed to start selling.
So this was like business development, so to speak.
Yeah, just all of the logistics, putting in a lot of well, first of all, I had to put in a fence because of rabbits, Sarah. I don't know if you know anything about rabbits.
I know nothing.
It was Rabbit City on that field. So the first thing I had to do was spend a lot of money bringing a huge digger in to flatten the ground to make it workable. I put a trench around my half acre that was a foot deep so that I could put chicken wire fencing in. That was a foot deep so that rabbits couldn't get in, so that I could protect my crop. And then I started planting, and I just had to take it one bed at a time. And boy, have those beds been hard won.
And do you mean that you've gone out there, you have the digger, but are you doing this all on your own, or have you got help?
So
is David useful?
David is definitely useful. His encouragement and his knowledge is really, really useful. He has done some physical work for me as well, but it's my business and it's my time. And so, yes, I physically dig every single bed that is there. And my beds at the moment are 11 metres long by 1 metre wide. And I have about 30 of them at the moment. So you do the math and see how many beds I've dug. And it's a combination, Sarah, of perennial planting. So for those of you who don't know what perennial means, that is plants that grow up in the spring and flower over the spring and summer, but die down in the winter. Right. But you don't have to plant them every year. You know that they're coming up. Then you have annual plants which you have to sow from seed every single year. And when that crop's over, you rip it out of the ground, all that work, and you're starting afresh the next year. And then also shrubs. And that's been a really big learning curve for me about spending money to make money. I know that sounds so simple, but the cheapest thing to do would be to sow everything from seed every year, but it would be a lot harder work. So it's about thinking, how much money do I invest in the perennials and shrubs, which might not give me the biggest yield in the first year, second year, some of the shrubs not even until year 5. But you have to see past the first few years and know that that is a good investment, but also not spending so much money on the shrubs that you have no flowers in the first few years.
Well, I am hearing a lot about, cash flow maybe.
Absolutely.
Whenever you're starting out.
Absolutely.
This business seems to need so much of your time and money initially. When did you start up?
I started in last September.
So have you started to reap the rewards yet?
So, Sarah, I couldn't be more thankful for how this year, I set myself with a very low bar. I thought, if this is my setup year and I don't sell anything, I have limited time looking after the children. And so I've got to be realistic here. But I am so, so thankful that, and you've got to remember that seasonal flowers, you're selling really from the end of March until the middle of September or beginning of October, depending on the weather. So you only have a 6-month window, half the year to sell, and the rest of the year is preparation for the next year. And also you have to plan almost a year in advance. Unlike, let's give an example of a bakery. I mean, you can bake to order, you can't sew flowers to order. You have to plan what florists want. You can't, the biggest lesson someone ever told me before I went into flower farming was, don't just sow what you want and then try and sell it just because you've grown it. You have to grow what people want as well, So you grow to order, not necessarily sow to order. And tell me about the florists that you work with and the people that you sell to. So how did you work out your customer base? Yeah, well, that's really interesting, Sarah. While I had all of these flowers growing, I was in the middle of planting, the middle of borders. You can only do so much planning when it comes to selling, because you also know that you're going to get the biggest return from direct sales. But at the same time, I don't have a flower shop. Also, you can you can sell a lot more wholesale to florists, but because I was just starting out, I knew that if I had every florist under the sun coming to me, I'd say, that is great, but come back to me in 5 years when I've got enough for all of you. So that kind of grew a little bit organically, to be honest with you. I knew I needed to do some direct sales, but I knew I needed to do some wholesale as well. And I knew flowers very well, but I didn't know business very well and growing and selling to florists. So yeah, it was a big learning curve. So I started off, once the flowers started to come up, it was almost a panic. It was like, oh, there are flowers here and I need to sell them. So I started off just a very small select customer base, people who I knew would be interested. And that has literally just snowballed.
Is that right?
People have said, oh, I love the flowers. My auntie was here. She said they were gorgeous. Could you please add her to your client list? And, oh, my friend is really interested. Do you mind adding her contact details? And this has just, oh my goodness, steamrolled. And so I have a really big client list, and every week I will sort of say what is available. Now, I don't tell people exactly what's in flower, because every 2 weeks, the joy of local sustainable flowers, Sarah, is that every 2 weeks, you know, the flower palette and the colour palette completely changes. So someone can buy a beautiful £40 bouquet 1 week, come back 2 weeks later, and they have a beautiful bouquet, but it's completely different. And people seem to just love that.
They don't know
what they're going to get. And I don't get what I guarantee. I say I don't guarantee what flowers you'll get, but I'll guarantee you that you will have a beautiful high-end luxury bouquet. I mean, if someone really has a very specific, well, I hate yellow.
Yeah.
I won't force yellow on them. Not that I like yellow anyway, so I don't have much yellow in the field. But, you know, that the customer seems to love it. And so then from a wholesale point of view, I restricted myself to working with one wedding florist, Floral Earth in Belfast, who are just amazing. Tim and the team, oh, you know, I have so much to be thankful to them for, because they just say, this is the weddings we have this week. What have you got? So I take photos and I say, well, look, I've got a fair few stems of this, if that would suit, or will this suit the colour palette? And they'll say, okay, I'll take 20 of these, or I'll take 15 of these, or I'll take 30 of these. But then there'll be some weeks where it just doesn't suit, and that's okay. They'll say, oh, I don't think they'll suit this week. Can I come to you next week? And, you know, that has just been amazing to learn picking in large numbers, and for a customer like a florist.
But you've also pointed to the fact that, you know, you've got the sustainable business, you've got seasonal flowers, everything's organic, and people love that, don't they?
They do. I think probably I think flowers are behind the curve with regards to education compared to consumables, compared to food. So I think people don't think about flowers sustainbly, not yet.
And where do they come from?
Where do they come from?
What miles have they travelled?
Exactly. So Sarah, 90+% of all cut flowers in the UK and Ireland, either in the florists' shops or in the supermarkets, all come via Holland, but most of those flowers are grown in South America and in Africa.
Gosh.
And so they come through Holland and are then, you know, shipped across the globe again.
Wow. We really don't know that.
No.
Well, I don't think we even think to ask the question.
You just don't even think about it. And so because of that, the pesticides and the fungicides and the other chemicals that they are treated in those countries, they don't have the same regulation that food does. And so they can basically put whatever they want on those flowers, and it isn't heavily regulated. Then in order to travel from, say, Colombia to Holland, then to Belfast, to a florist in Belfast, they're sprayed with preservatives as well. Yes. So first of all, they have had sprayed in pesticides. They have come halfway across the globe to get to us. But on top of that, Sarah, like our fruit and vegetables are now chosen because the varieties are robust and they won't damage during transport. The same is happening with flowers. So you'll see that you're getting less and less and less variety of flowers because they're coming from South America. They need to be jostled and tossed about a little bit and not get damaged. So you're getting just thicker stems, and all of those lovely, beautiful, ethereal and twinkly bits and just really magical flowers have just been completely lost. So what we offer, and what I offer at Hilltop Flowers, is flowers that are grown locally, and because they're grown locally, they are picked the day before. They are fully conditioned and hydrated for 24 hours so that they have the longest vase life, and then you have them. Number two, it's really good for pollinators. I don't use any chemicals at all. So you're not losing the pollinators, which we all know now are not just so valuable for growing plants, but for life as a whole. So there are so many advantages. They haven't got the carbon footprint either. And actually, Sarah, interestingly, there was a study done by the National Institute of Health on florists' fingers and fingernails and skin on their fingers, and the levels of toxicity that are in florists' skin and fingernails as a result of working with the water that flowers are in that have come from the
goodness.
wholesalers.
I had no idea. This is an education.
Yeah, they're at a really toxic level to a point that it can cause cancer and also infertility. And if you imagine, obviously that's terrible for the florist, but then your flowers have been in that water and then you're putting that water down the sink. And, you know, £6 billion is spent in the UK every year on cut flowers, and 90% of those are not grown sustainably. So that's £60 million worth of, you know, very toxic water going into the water systems as well that needs to be treated. So there are so many reasons why local flowers are, number one, good for pollinators, your health, but also, crucially, you get a better product at the end of the day.
This is staggering, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people looking at each other, maybe if they're in their car travelling or they're just walking along, listening to this podcast going, I had no idea.
I know.
And you know, it's starting a conversation. It's starting to think differently. What are the florists saying to you?
The florists are saying if we could buy everything locally, we would buy everything locally. Then there are some people, some florists I feel are more invested in that than others, because let's be honest, the wholesalers in Holland make it so easy. You can order something online the day before and then you can go into your florist shop the next morning and the overnight lorry has the key for your flower shop and they're there ready for you to work with. So,
so how do you compete against that, or will you never try to compete against that?
I know that my product is a luxury. It's a different product, Sarah. It is a different product. It's a luxury product that will have most of my flowers, or as many flowers I can, will have scent. The way that you can compete is that many florists have said to me that in order to know that they have enough quality blooms that they can use, they will order twice as many flowers as they need. The quality has started to decline when it comes to buying flowers wholesale from abroad. And they know that if they're buying from me, then it's fresh the day before. And Tim from Floral Earth always says to me, the difference in quality is just amazing. Now, I've got to be realistic. I don't have flowers from October right through to March. So people need flowers during that time. And so a very wise florist, Janet from the Flower Room Belfast, once said, and she grows quite a lot of flowers that she uses herself in her wedding floristry in her allotment. She says, I kind of see it as a hybrid car. I buy as much as I can locally, but I know that I'm going to have to buy also from the wholesaler as well. I don't think we will ever be able to provide all year round at the numbers that every single florist wants, but it's a start. And I think if florists can do as much as they can, as well as us as flower farmers, we need to be going out there and actually explaining the benefits of it, and also the consumer. People say, what can I do? And if people look up the Flowers from the Farm website, flower farmers across the UK are listed there, and you can contact them and buy from them. Or, you know, if you have someone in Wales you want to send flowers to, you can just look up flower farmers in Wales and they will make locally grown bouquets for whoever you want.
That's so interesting again.
Yeah,
so if you're listening to this and think, I'm going to change what I do, I want to go back to the business though. At the end of the day, you have to run a business. You're doing it all by yourself. You've had a really positive start. But this is moving into the quieter time now. So the money's not coming in now. Again, talk to me about that. Is that a big challenge?
So, yes, a lot of flower farmers have sort of diversified into doing workshops and, you know, Christmas workshops, making Christmas wreaths, autumn pumpkin bouquets and such like. I am hoping not to go down that route. I have sort of plans of what I would like to do to keep the cash flow going through the autumn and winter and early spring. But at the moment, I just have to be really realistic with the time that I have with the children. I could have waited until all my children were in school when I started this business, but, you know, there's never a perfect time to start a business, is there? And I thought if I wait another however many 4 years once Jude is born, you know, that's 4 years I could have started and I could have got this. So I am accepting of the fact that I am not going to make anything until March.
And then you make it last longer.
But you make it, yeah. But what you have to do is really think. So what I am doing is making sure that next year I am working so hard in order to have twice as many plants for the following year. Gotcha. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to just keep expanding, I now have someone who I employ on a self-employed basis. Actually, the Horticulture College in Caffrey have asked if I will take students because they like what I am doing. And I had a volunteer from there who I have now employed on a self-employed basis to come and do some work for me. So I have to be realistic with the time that I have. If I think, right, I planted this amount of flowers with my time and my physical energy in this amount of time, you just have to use the maths. If I have one more person doing some work for me, then I can plant, double the amount of flowers. And ultimately, it's about planning. I know that I will not be making a profit for at least 3 years, but if you don't start, you never will.
Yeah, but you've got the vision, you know where you're going. And if you look at other industries, like maybe the tourism industry in certain places, it could be completely dead over the winter, but they know that then you work so hard when you need to.
Exactly. And you know what? There's also a blessing in that, Sarah. The busiest time of the year is late spring and all the way through the summer, because you're still continuing to plant to make sure that you have flowers, a succession of flowers coming through the whole of the flower season, but then you are picking and arranging on top of that. So I would get up at 5:30 in the morning, especially in the summer holidays, get to the field when the sun is up, start picking, pick, put them all in the dark room so that they can fully hydrate, so that it can be arranged the next day. I then go home, get the kids to school, then go back up to the field to do the planting. Then I make bouquets from the flowers that were picked the day before. And then once the children are in bed, if I haven't got enough flowers for the next day, I go back up to the field to pick. And so I have put my body and soul and all my finances into this, but I know that I am on the schedule that I want to be at the moment, and I have to see several years ahead.
Well, you're still smiling.
I
must love it.
I love it, Sarah. I can't even tell you. And I love the digging as much as I love the picking. And people say, what's your favourite part? And I think, I don't know. I genuinely love it all. I suppose I have, when you really are digging a border, you think, well, it's a bit monotonous, but it's not like I dislike it either. And I'm out there with the benefits of being brought up on a farm, Sarah, is that that the business has to keep going whatever the weather. You just change your clothing and you get out there, and there's always something that you can do. And I have planted 500 gladioli bulbs in the absolute sleet and pouring rain. But you know what? You're putting it in the ground knowing that you're going to have flowers in a few months' time, which is spectacular. So you don't even really see the rain because you know what the outcome's going to be.
Good life lessons, really. And for the children watching this and seeing how the hard work pays off and the beauty that comes from it.
Absolutely. But I think there's a caution to be said in that too, Sarah. When I started this, I think it would be very easy starting a business. You could be working at it all day, every day. You could be answering emails all day, every day. You could be you'll never have enough time in the day for your own business. So you have to be really conscious, and you have to be really intentional about the times that you're not working. Mm-hmm. And when David and I were talking about this and talking about the logistics of family life, I said, as far as I possibly can, I will never work on a Saturday and Sunday because I have small children. What is the point in having the most successful business in the world but sad children who are resentful of the time that you spent on the business? And for a few extra pounds, there has to be the balance. And ultimately, I'm doing it for us as our family. And what's the point in doing it if you're not spending time with your family? So I spend my time on, as I said, when the children are sleeping, I go to the farm, or when they're at school. And of course, there are times that, there is a bit of a crossover and you can't do much about that. But as long as you have clear boundaries, mm-hmm. and sometimes I just have to put my phone on the mantelpiece. If it rings, I know it's, I can hear it. If a text comes through, I can hear it. But it would be so tempting to reply to emails all the time. And I think I would say to people if they're starting off a business, and especially if they have children, don't sacrifice the rest of life on the altar of your business within limits. You have to work. I have given my all to this, but I have set myself parameters.
And it's so important to do that because,
Absolutely.
I usually apply the nobody died test. It will be okay.
Yeah.
The work will still be there in the morning, but burnout is real among entrepreneurs and people who run their own business.
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering what kind of help you got setting up the business. So you had a business idea. A lot of people go on different programs, or they join a local chamber, or they avail of some funding to help. Have you had anything?
So when I started thinking about a business, obviously I knew plants well, I knew growing well, I knew flower arranging well, but I wasn't a business person. I like to think that I keep a good documentation on all of my outgoings and taking my profits, but I didn't really know anything about business. So I did avail of the Go For It program, and Robbie Jameson was very, very good and helpful at just explaining the basics of business to me and sort of getting my head in the right place for that. I'll be honest, I don't have the best maths brain. I have many other skills, but neither David or I would be people who probably have pure business brains. But what I would say to people is, you can pay people to help you with that. It would be really sad if I hadn't started this flower farm just because I didn't have the genes for great accounting. So you can employ an accountant to do that. And equally, you could also have people who are very good at accounting and have business minds, but also don't have the vision and don't have the skills to and creativity to start a business. So anything that you feel that you can't do, there are always people who can help. And certainly the Go For It program was very helpful for me. And yes, an accountant too, to keep me right.
I'm loath to ask this question, and I hope that people weren't saying, is she going to ask this question? How do you plan to grow your business?
Well, yes, I plan to grow my business literally by growing. And I don't mean that sarcastically. It's simple. The more stems you have, the more stems you can sell. And so I have invested in, and half of my piece of land is now filled with plants. So my target for next year is to fill the next half with plants. I have just invested in a large industrial polytunnel because I want to grow more undercover, especially the roses, because roses don't, while they grow in Northern Irish weather, for floristry, they have to be pristine and you get any rain or wind on them. So I will be doing a lot more roses undercover. I trialed some last year. So it's basically, Sarah, simple. It is more flowers. It is reaching out to more florists and working with more florists. I don't think I have the capacity to do any more direct sale myself. I am at my capacity with the number of bouquets that I can make myself. So then I have to think, okay, where are my other streams coming from? So I will probably be going down the route of more wholesale to florists. And I have been talking to some local farm shops and sort of high-end farm shops as well. And I am thinking about selling through them also.
It's so exciting, and it just sounds idyllic, and just seeing the passion for your flowers and for your family and for your life. I just wish you such success. I'm sure David is so proud of you.
Oh, do you know, I think he is. I think he is. He doesn't say much, but I just don't think he can believe how much has happened in 1 year. I really don't.
In 1 year. And tell people where they can find out more if they want to have a look at what you're doing.
Absolutely. So yes, please find out more by going onto Instagram and Facebook at Hilltop Flowers. And I have a website as well, which is hilltopflowers.co.uk. If you're interested in becoming a customer, you can always directly contact me and I will add you to the customer list. If you were a florist and you would like to come up and know more about it, please just give me a message. You know, I love my flowers and I love showing people around, and it's just really lovely to be able to share it and to show where the business is going in the future.
Do you deliver, or do people have to come to you?
When it comes, yes, at the moment, people pick up from me. So obviously there's a geographical restriction there. In the future, I hope that will change. But again, times and seasons in life, I've just started off. That is something for maybe 3 years' time.
And before I ask you the final question that I put to all of the guests who sit where you are today, I'd love to know, do you have a favourite flower?
That's a really interesting question. Every season, I probably have different favourites, and every 2 weeks I have a different favourite. But I think that the flower that surprised me most was the ranunculus. They were just so spectacular and flowered for so long and had such a long vase life. I mean, the sweet peas are gorgeous and they smell so gorgeous, but they're a luxury that you only have for 3 days in a vase, whereas ranunculus just kind of has it all. It lasts nearly 2 weeks in a vase and it just gets better and looks so fabulous. So I'll regret saying ranunculus because I'll go in the car on the way home, I'll think, it isn't ranunculus, it's something.
But it is right now today.
Right now today, as you're talking to me, yes, I think, you know, they are just fabulous and in every different colour under the sun too.
Now, the purpose of this podcast, Angharad, is to inspire existing business owners and ambitious entrepreneurs to grow their business by offering an insight into the success of businesses such as your fabulous Hilltop Flowers. What advice would you give to those who may have a business idea but have no idea where to begin or are unsure as to whether the risk is worth taking?
That's such a good question, and I think there are probably quite a few answers to that. I'll give you two, though. I think research is key. Obviously, with business, no matter how much you research and how much planning you put into it, there's always an element of risk and rolling the dice. But we've also been given brains to try and think it through as logically as possible. And as I said before, I had visited other flower farms. I had looked at what was around and about. I had done my research with courses and read books. And I had to look at what was already out there. And I think if you see that you have a unique product that you know people can't find anywhere else and you can compete with what's already there, then you have a good chance at giving it a really good go. I mean, for example, if you see that the market is saturated with people who've been doing it for a really long time and you're starting from scratch, I think probably your head should tell you that maybe that isn't the way to go, no matter how much enthusiasm that you have for it. So I think you have to be sensible and use your head. And what I saw out there was, I think that I can compete with this. And I think that, and I hope this doesn't sound proud in any way, but I hope that I can do better, and I strive to do better, and I strive to give people the best cut flowers that they can buy in Northern Ireland. And secondly, I would say, once you've started your business, make sure that you're not sacrificing all the other important things in life. While I have given myself all of myself physically and mentally, and I have invested so much money into this with the hope and knowing that I will get the return, make sure that you don't sacrifice the important things in life. If you have children, make sure you're spending time with them. Make sure that they don't come back to you in the future and resent you for it. But also I can see with my children that they're very proud of what I'm doing, even at the young ages that they are. It's really lovely for them to see such hard work, and hopefully that will teach them something for the future. But also don't look back in 20 years' time when your children are grown up and think, I wish I'd spent more time with them.
And there is a great lesson. Angharad Maxwell, thank you so much for joining me today in the podcast studio. You can tune in again next time, folks. I will be joined by Tom Houston from Immersinal for another fantastic episode of the Public Eye podcast. Thank you, Angharad.
Thank you.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service, where our team using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.